don't have the numbers yet as to the persons who were abducted while they were praying in Niger State. Niger State has become quite notorious for mass abduction. But let's bring in the expert who understands the backstory. Onyekachi Adekoya is a security consultant and the CEO of PL24 Group. Mr. Onyekachi, thank you. Mr. Adekoya, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me, and good morning to the viewers.
You know, we've had conversations for years now, and you've always warned that we haven't hit a crescendo. But lately, we've seen successes recorded in terms of neutralizing terrorists, arresting some, prosecuting some, getting them convicted, the DSS, the military. We've seen, in fact, some good success story, and then boom, this has happened. So let me start from that question I always ask. Is this the final crescendo? Because as we speak, there's no official number as to the number of persons that have been abducted, but we hear that there are a lot of people were abducted a few days ago. What do you make of the latest development?
Yeah, Geoffrey, I mean, first of all, we empathize with the families whose loved ones have been abducted. We understand, according to reports, that some people also lost their lives in the process. Sadly, we are here again to talk about these issues. I do think that we need to run away from the optics of the narrative a bit and look at the critical reality that we always react after the fact. And the question is, why do we react after the fact like this? Is we go from presidential directive to presidential directive, and you know, there's a lot of issues that followed, even the rescues themselves. When the people are rescued, you know, who has been arrested? Do we have any prosecution? Or are we sitting waiting for another adoption? I think those are the bigger issues beyond the optics and the question of whether we have reached the crescendo or not, because obviously we have not, and these matters will be there, primarily because we are behind the curve in being hands-on and closing in on the issues, if you ask me.
Well, Mr. Adekoya, I think last week we had Kabiru Adamu here on this show, and he said there are gaps, but he also said we have made some sort of progress. And I'm just feeling personally for those who live in some certain parts of the country, for instance, Niger State, Benue State, Plateau State, Borno, Zamfara, if they would agree with him in terms of if indeed we have made any progress. The Nigerian Tribune is reporting that 43 persons have been killed. That's what they are reporting. And in terms of those who were kidnapped, we do not have the numbers just yet. A very dark man is in the news. He's alleging that it looks like there's some sort of compromise and complicity on the part of either the government or the security agencies. How can we tackle this? Because we cannot go on like it's hard to believe that hundreds of persons are moved on motorcycles for minutes and hours, and yet there's no presence of security agencies, there's no intelligence whatsoever.
Okay, you've asked a very difficult question. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Niger in particular, Niger borders Kwara, it borders particularly the Lake Kanji, the forest reserve, borders Kwara, Kebbi, Niger, and Benin Republic. You do recall that 3 weeks ago, I think precisely 3 weeks ago, about 308 people were rescued from a similar type adoption. Again, if you listen to my opening statement, as with the Oyo Orire rescue, we didn't hear the stories of those who were arrested. There's no case of prosecution. All we hear is rescue and release. And it's not a fire and forget system. it's a fire and reload, because then you're going to have this again. For Niger in particular, again, these assailants are able to roam freely between Benin Republic, the forest belt between Benin Republic and Nigeria, and then flow through Kwara. I think the Kanji Lake Reserve is also being a staging area for a number of those attacks. So what is missing critically when the government gives a presidential directive? I should assume that a joint task force will be formed between the police, the Nigerian Army, the National Counter-Terrorism Center, and the DSS. We don't know what that command structure is like and what the command directives are to whatever structure has been set up. We sometimes still have clearance operations where the law enforcement go into these areas, clear out camps, and then they withdraw, which speaks to a bigger problem. So when the military goes in and does a surgical operation, who do they hand over to? What system are they handing over to? If the policing structure, which with profound respect to my military friends, the military over the years has put in a state of coma. Now we wake up suddenly, we want to be able to hand over those operations to the police. It becomes a bit of a challenge, which is why you now see that finally, after a long time, we're achieving some convergence on the issue of state police. If you do recall, 15, 20 years ago, the military, even the federal police, were strongly opposed to the state police. So I think that what we're seeing is a clear display of symptoms of our deep-seated problem. That one, when the military goes in with high kinetic force and does a clearance operation, there is no force to be able to hold territory and govern a space. Two, the political governance structure in some of these areas are non-existent. How are the camps able to sustain themselves? For example, report will show that they collect tax on mining, on logging, on agricultural produce, even on transit. So when you have people setting some similitude of governance structure and collecting tax, you're going to have a proliferation of some of these camps. And then the next thing also goes is this rescue. Are they true rescue? Are we paying ransom? Are we just even pandering to the imperatives of the moment, just to save face politically while trying to address the structural issue we have to reform? So the issues are there before us. But to Geoffrey's initial question, is this the end of it? Unfortunately, no, because now the issues are now joining with the political season towards 2027. So, my brother, your question is very tough and difficult, really. I would just include in that we don't have a clear plan yet in sight that meets this issue on the board, decisively. And unfortunately, we would have to go from case to case, presidential directive to presidential directive, rescue or ransom payment or whatever it is we call it, without prosecution. Clearance operation without, holding territory so that you can stage to the next thing, and then we just go like this. Much of it looks like political theatrics to me, if you ask me.
Well, let's hope that this next one is not a difficult question. The NFIU, in its 2025 annual report, has led us to understand that it has discovered that terrorist networks use crowdfunding methods that deploy accounts of dead persons, accounts registered in female names, to move funding to support networks and cells back home here in Nigeria. Now, the question is, what is new that the NFIU has told us? Where does it lead us? And this is especially because NIMC says about 136 million Nigerians have so far registered for the NIN number. We have quite a number of BVN linked to SIMs as well. But why does this not move the needle in the fight against terrorism and particularly discovering those accounts and persons that are funding terrorism and are active on ground perpetrating these heinous crimes?
Okay, thank you for the question. To be very frank, the NFIU has not said anything that is not known. It's not news at all. If you are within a system, you know that the banks are hemorrhaging heavily. And again, the banks would not come to the fore to say that, this is what is happening, but they are losing a lot of money, particularly to this funny NIMC thing. The NIN itself is not particularly what it should be. So I'm on national TV. There are some things we don't have to talk about. Much of it is just a shame. So I would say the NFIU has information, good and fine, God be praised. So it means that they have their finger on the trigger and they'll be closing the gap. And then this terrorism financing should be a thing of the past. If they are making a statement for statement's sake, which I suspect they are doing, then why the run around? Why the noise? They are empowered by law to close this gap. They should go ahead and close it. But the issues are bigger than the NFIU as currently constituted. It's a problem of capacity, it's a problem of technical ability, it's a problem of resource. And importantly, in security operation, logistics is also very, very, very important because the NFIU has become a serious marketplace. As it is today, they are flooded with cases upon cases. Some financial institutions are just writing off loss, let alone being able to trace terrorism financing. You have also asked a difficult question, which deals with capacity, really. We set up institutions. I would always argue that Nigeria, and I'm not a politician, I don't have to be politically correct. Nigeria is like a man who has married 37 wives and is struggling for priorities. Do I buy clothes? Do I give food? Do I have shelter? Do I pave the road to the house? Do we think about the future of the children? And, coming from a long backlog of financial magic, as we had under the Buhari administration and what you call methonomics. We are now here grappling with so many things at the same time, let alone being able to look at institutions and the efficacy, the operational efficacy of those institutions, like NFIU, being able to now trace terrorism financing. So what you then find in Nigeria is that when there's a big case where the government is interested in, then you can use the office of the NSA to, dedicate very scarce resources to one or two cases, which is the max they can do to, to resolve those cases, and then you go again to the next one. So your question really on terrorism financing and the difficulties around it, it's a problem of capacity. With the NIMC, the way we set it up, you do your NIM through kiosk, roadside people, the system itself, the integrity of the system is very challenged. And, this report about, it's not new, basically, using dead people's zone, using other people's number. It is even reported that people who are not Nigerians have the NIN numbers, in great quantity. And even when you're doing your KYC for some financial solution, because we also have a tech company where we also provide support to some financial institutions on some. What we find is that, there's the bulk of numbers coming particularly from northern Nigeria is very challenging. You have people pop into this country, get the NIN, and then they pop out, and then they have BVN and they can set up these accounts. And, we then begin to talk again. I listened to your initial conversation around subnational governments and then the active controls and local governments that should be there, that is also not there in the states, which then feeds into a bigger problem for the financial institution and financial system in Nigeria. And then trying to meet terrorism financing becomes very fluid because the integrity of the system is not what it should be. So the problems we have are...
I'm sure they are not they are surmountable. Perhaps it's the will and the aggregation of all the interests to be able to get this done. The poor people, the regular Nigerians, as they call it, are the ones at the receiving end, which is very painful most of the time. But must thank you, Mr. Onyekachi Adekoya, security consultant and the CEO of PR24 Group. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.